All right. I appreciate you coming, my friend. First of
Yeah.
all, thank you. I appreciate it. I know you made a harrowing drive at could be traffic in Atlanta hours,
uh,
which is always,
Wasn't too bad. Don't
yeah.
worry.
Thanks for coming. This is Burn the Ship. Our goal is to connect entrepreneurs with professionals that can help you go all in on your business. I've been looking forward to this one, so I appreciate you coming once again. But our goal is just to talk to people that have walked the walk and talked the talk and been through things that we experience as small business owners so that we can kind of bottle up some of those skills and experiences and teach them to that next generation. We want to show you guys where we've walked so that hopefully you guys can walk there a little safer. From the hundreds and hundreds of people that we've had in this seat, we've learned about a lot of things that people do well, a lot of things that people do poorly, and how they overcome those things. And I'm happy to have that same conversation with you. So why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Richard Sims. I am co-founder for a software firm called Tyrannosaurus Tech. And what we do is technology strategy, software design, and development. So we do a lot of building web applications, mobile applications, partnering with organizations that are trying to bring a new product to market.
Sure.
So we've got a good range, certainly, in our history, but a lot of our work is in healthcare, public health, education, kind of SaaS products
Sure.
in that space. Yeah.
So tell me a story, because the first time that I ever came across the Tyrannosaurus Tech brand, so we do a lot of like ISV integrations and SaaS integrations
Yeah.
here for payments, right? And the first time that we had been through that process 4 or 5 times and really kind of understood how we need to discuss developers. We had found like a really good developer liaison that was like helping me bridge the gap between speaking technology and speaking sales. So we were heavily into the startup space.
Yeah.
And when I came across Tyrannosaurus Tech, it was because you guys were doing like some community outreach, some events, things like that. So tell me a story. You kind of did it begin with software development in mind, and how did it kind of progress from there?
Yeah, great question. So I have a partner, Carlos, in the business.
I've met Carlos. By the
Yeah,
way,
and
yeah.
he's awesome. Like I've known him for a long time, and we had a little bit of like a stars aligned opportunity where we both were kind of freed up for the next thing. And, it was a good time to kind of do something risky, and I think we both felt comfortable enough that we had skill sets we could fall back on if things didn't work out.
Sure.
And, that's kind of one of those pieces of advice for folks that are looking to take the plunge is hopefully you fundamentally have a skill set that is marketable. So in a lot of instances, it's like, hey, what's the worst case scenario here? I try this for 6 months. It's a disaster.
Get a job or start a company.
I go get a job, and people, hey, like respect that I had the guts to try something. So, anyways, I think the question of kind of our transformation.
How long ago was that? 7 years.
It'll be 8 years.
8 years.
This spring, summer since
Yeah.
we started the business. So it's definitely been a big evolution. And when we just started, of course, it was just the two of us. He's more of the engineering mind. I'm more on the business side, although we both wear a lot of hats, like still. And I was kind of coming from the world of still technology services, but more training oriented, like my previous business.
Sure.
We did all kinds of like teaching, design, and development skills. So for me, it's a very different world, but not wildly in another universe, right? It's kind of like, hey,
Still talking to the same kind of people.
yeah, we know these people, we know good engineers, we know what we're doing, and we can help people that need to build out new products for whatever reason that is. And what I would say, I suppose, as far as the transformation, we naturally started, very strictly engineering, and a lot of times I'll just explain to people that in my world, there is this spectrum of on one end is execution, on the other end is strategy. And at the beginning, we were naturally very execution focused. We were very much like a dev shop, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Which was kind of like,
We can write your code.
we've got engineers,
fix your stuff.
we can write code, like come tell us what you need. And that's, that's okay. But really the transformation for us has been increasingly, being a lot more on that strategic side where we're not just taking orders and trying to write up requirements. We're trying to figure out like, what's the market that this is going into? Where do you fit into that landscape? Who are these users? How do we understand their pain points? How do we really break out work in a way that we can manage these projects successfully? So these days, we are a lot more involved in that capacity, like really where's this going from the beginning and why are you building this product? And then doing a lot more of the early stage design work up through implementation. So again, that's all been natural, but very deliberate because
Sure.
we want to build quality products and we want to build stuff that folks want to use and that has a positive impact. And so some of that means really like wrapping our arms around every piece of the vision and what we're doing.
Sure. What has the startup market in Atlanta? What is that roller coaster that you've ridden for almost 8 years of the startup market in Atlanta now that you've been with Tyrannosaurus Tech?
Yeah, I mean, it's been all over the place. I would say overwhelmingly, as most folks know, I think like the startup scene in Atlanta has grown a lot. And so that's been really fun and good for us. And we've been able to kind of ride that wave to a degree. I wouldn't say that most of our clients are startups in the truest sense. Like we have done a fair amount of work with startups, of course, but typically we're working with more small or mid-sized businesses or even nonprofits that like have really identified an opportunity in their space that they know very well,
Sure.
and are trying to again launch a product into that world. But that being said, so much of our network has been built up kind of in the Atlanta startup scene.
Sure.
And so I moved back to Atlanta in 2013, and this was, years before we started Tyrannosaurus Tech, but that was when truly Atlanta Tech Village had like just opened. I
Oh
remember
yeah.
going over there and they were like knocking down walls and
Oh yeah.
putting it together. And so, yeah, the scene has come up a ton. I think like COVID turned a lot on its head, right?
Changed the money for sure.
Yeah, and I think now is an interesting time. I think a lot of the investment is like on hold, and people are kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. I suppose with interest rates and the economy and like all
Sure.
the world craziness. But short answer is like overwhelmingly the growth in the Atlanta startup scene has been fantastic, amazing. Like we've really benefited from it, as you know, and how we met. We've always just tried to be really engaged, like be out there, go to a lot of events, host a lot of events, try to kind of be a resource for folks that are like interested in tech or trying to
Sure.
break into the space. And, we want to be good stewards of technology. And then it's not purely altruistic. Like we know that it comes around. And that's, a lot of people that have ended up coming to us as customers. We met them out or like we kind of did some free consultations with them back in the day. And so they trust us and like, so it's been a big part of our story. It's just like being real tuned in to
Sure.
Atlanta specifically.
Yeah, I feel like the resources for startups in Atlanta has changed. That's probably the biggest change that I've seen in that space is that there were technology companies in Atlanta. There's never been a lot of angel investment still today, right? No, not true angel investment. There's a lot of private equity and money to be found and grants and pitch competitions, and there's money to be had in the startup space, but it's not like, oh, you have this good idea, I'm going to give you millions of dollars to flesh it out. But through being in that startup space for like 7 years now, I feel like the amount of people that value the community in the startup space is like exponentially more than what it was. People prior to COVID didn't mind kind of captaining their own ship, you know what I mean? And then there's all these resources of people that I think the big thing in COVID was like coaching, right? Like tons of people went into coaching or trying to find ways to bring value on their own existing skill set without actually having to do a bunch of work, which I understand. Everybody's in a different place in their life, but just the amount of people that have like exited from multiple companies, built multiple products, been on the strategy side of product implementation or identifying an adjustable market. Like there are tons of people out there that are constantly hosting things that are trying to find ways to be valuable to the startup community. And I know that existed early on, but I feel like there's a lot more of it now than what it was when it started, and people are utilizing a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Would you agree? You agree?
Oh yeah, totally. And I think, I don't know.
It's probably not just an Atlanta thing, but
Yeah, and I think even though we're arguably a few years out from like COVID, I think there's still kind of pent up energy there.
sure.
Like I went to a good like Tag Atlanta event last night, if you're familiar, and
Oh, yeah.
like
Technology Association of Georgia.
yeah, and it was like very vibrant, and it's funny. I mean, I'm candid with people. Is like Carlos and I used to be just like fiends about going to events and stuff, um, and it was a lot of fun. And again, a big way that we kind of built our networks. And I think for both of us, like we got married, we had little kids, like COVID hit, so all that took a back seat. But we're really trying to get back out there, and it's been reinvigorating, to
Sure.
kind of see, like, talk to a lot of
It
founders
just
and
feels a little different than
yeah.
prior to COVID, right?
hmm
Oh man, yeah, it's a different thing. How old are your kids?
My son will be 3 in April.
Oh, he is a COVID baby, huh?
Yeah, and then our daughter just turned 5.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, right before, huh?
so it's a lot of fun. They, yeah, they're like COVID kids, but they don't know the difference. So
No,
like,
they don't.
I think they were young enough that they'll be like, "What? That happened?"
If they're in kindergarten, it would be a different story. If they were in kindergarten, like year one of COVID, it'd be
Yeah.
a different thing. Like
Yeah.
mine was. I have a 6-year-old,
Okay. Yeah.
and he was like as we were getting back into school was like kindergarten,
Yeah.
know. So it was like this very COVID forward mindset, but just like first time he's ever interacted with anybody, it's the only
Yeah.
thing he knows. And now I
Yeah.
have a daughter that's like she's 11 months,
hmm
and it's just it's very interesting to see the development that happens to you professionally whenever you have kids. That's why I
Oh,
always
yeah.
like to ask. It changes the way that you do
Oh,
things.
100%.
It changes the way that you value your time. And it's an important thing I think to touch on in entrepreneurs is like it will change the way that you do business.
Oh, yeah.
It will change the way
Yeah.
that you conduct yourself and how you spend your time, and you can either make the most of your time, or you cannot. It's really
Yeah.
the only two options. But it it's a cool thing to go through that process with
Yeah.
the reason that you go through the process every day staring at you in
Oh,
the
sure.
face and
Yeah.
pulling your leg whenever you get home,
And
so
yeah, I mean, no question, it changes everything, of course, and maybe that's a cliche, but I'm very grateful that Carlos and our kids are very close in age.
oh really?
So we kind of went through it like around the same time,
Oh really?
and so I think we just were like, I get it, I know, like
Yeah, you
whatever.
always
You didn't
understand.
get sleep last night or whatever it is. Like it helps a lot to kind of have that empathy.
Sure.
So like it's funny. I'll tell people it's like my co-founder for my previous business who's fantastic. She had like her first and second kid when we were working together, and of course I tried to be supportive, but like
Sure.
I
You
realize
don't. Yeah.
I realize now I'm like I had just no
You can't until you
concept
go through it.
of like what was going on.
Until you go through it, you have no. You're like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
tired, and you're like, oh, grab a cup of coffee. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? And then you have kids, and you're like, different tired.
Yeah.
It's a
Yeah,
different kind
for
of
sure,
tired.
for sure.
What would you say that you guys did well? What was kind of your superpower early on, right? Both from a developmental perspective,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like the ability to gear your mind toward strategy and understand that there was some need to evolve. But
Mm-hmm.
what would you guys say was kind of the most important skill as far as beginning to grow your business and connect with the community and all those things?
Yeah, I think for us, part of it, the skills, of course, have to fundamentally be there, right? Like we have to do good engineering work, we have to do good design work. I think that's kind of a given. But I think what's been important for us and more of a differentiator, I suppose, is like Carlos and I are both very business minded. Again, he's got that underlying engineering skill set, but like he started a bunch of businesses himself. I think that what we've done really well, and this is even kind of wrapped up in our brand, which is kind of like, let's make this approachable, let's have fun with it. So I think what we've done well is like recognize that, again, the quality of the work has to be there, but equally important is like how we bring the client along in this
The experience, yeah.
because most of our clients, they're not engineers, right? And so I think so much of it is about effective project management.
Oh yeah.
Again, really making sure we're building the right thing,
And then still having that conversation without getting too technical with the
right,
people that
and
are,
like
yeah.
making sure they understand what's going on under the hood. And I was talking with Jay before we started about how it can be so difficult to like convey the value when you're really in the weeds on software development projects.
Oh my
right?
God, it's so hard. That was my problem early on because like I was drinking from a fire hose, learning about
Yeah.
development. I was no developer. I'm still no developer. You know what I mean? But I know enough to be dangerous.
Sure.
but I was learning so much so
Mm-hmm.
fast. Like the first book that I ever got into coding was literally Coding for Dummies.
Mm-hmm.
So it made it super easy. It was
Yeah.
literally like page one. Oh, here's the next thing you learn. Here's the next thing you learn. And
Right.
I was just taking in so much information. Then I would have these conversations with people where I have no value in the actual development. Like I'm not
Mm-hmm.
selling the development or doing the development or making a piece off the development, nothing. I process credit cards. That's what my company does.
Mm-hmm.
But I would learn the technical things and I would be able to identify those technical things whenever I would see someone's product in motion. And I
Yeah.
would want to have that technical conversation. They would be like, oh, I didn't build it. And I'm like, I can't blame you. Yeah, I wouldn't have built it either. It's hard to learn that um fine line between salesmanship and the ability to talk
Yeah.
the technology is a very thin line.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Like we're probably you and I like roughly in the same boat because I've worked in tech my whole career and the progression in a sense has been like getting more technical just in the sense that like everything we're doing is uber technical, right?
Sure.
So I established a long time ago and try to continue investing in like a sufficient understanding to like empathize with the engineers, like talk with them at a
Sure.
high level, like speak intelligently about what we do, et cetera. But, going back to your question about what some of our strengths have been, I have found it incredibly advantageous to like at the end of the day, I am not an engineer.
Right.
I'm not going to go in there and like write code within a client app. I'm not going to be equipped to like pull an all-nighter and save the project.
Yeah.
And that's been really advantageous because, one, I can focus on more what I need to focus
Sure.
on, which is like the business and the relationships. And then it's forced, me to surround myself with people that are good at that stuff that
Exactly. You keep everybody on the ship, you know what I mean?
because sometimes, it's like kind of, I don't know, like a little bit of, not startup 101, but like small business 101. And it's like the textbook examples like you're a great baker, so you want to start a bakery. And like that's good.
Yeah.
That there's nothing like wrong with that. But if you're trying to grow it, particularly let's say you're in this, analogy, you're trying to open up multiple locations, like at some point you being a good baker does not
Not
help.
enough.
It
Yeah.
does not help. Like you have to learn how to like frankly get away from that or
Oh, yeah.
find someone who can.
I equate it to golf a lot because I tell people like the bakery analogy is perfect, right? But I tell people the high level business things, right? And kind of the best way that I found is like, look, in golf, you have to constantly remind yourself to be thinking of the smallest things in your swing. You have to remind yourself to do the same thing over and over again. Sometimes from a business perspective, you just need to be reminded that, hey, here is something to be thinking about from a high level. I'm not
Sure.
telling you
Yeah.
something that you don't know, but that features and benefits whirlwind is a death machine for startups. If you
Oh, yeah.
if you spend all of your time and money and resources focusing on building features and benefits for small percentages of your clients, it becomes expensive, becomes time exhaustive, makes you unhappy with your product. It makes your product, for a lot of the time, it makes your product jumbled and the user experience becomes more difficult.
Yeah.
So I tell people that all the time. I'm like, hey, end of the day, we're solving a problem for a customer here. And a lot of them, if you're a SaaS business and you're on that freemium model, you need millions of users to exit. You need millions of people to download this. Maybe if you're in the B2B world, you need 500 or 1,000, right? But you still have to look at things from sometimes you just have to be able to look from a 30,000 foot view at what's
Sure.
going on from your business. So they need people like us as well that's not going to be stuck in the weeds over a handful of lines of code.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you still have to remind people, hey, what we're doing here from a business perspective, we're doing really well. Even just saying that, it's like, hey, I'm looking at it from a 30,000 foot view, and we may have issues. We may have
Yeah.
technology problems or staffing problems or whatever that may be. But it looks like we're on the right track from where I'm looking is an important thing to remind people.
Sure.
So.
Oh, yeah. And I think a lot of what you're saying resonates. Like we do a lot of exercises with our team because to their credit, like all the folks, let's say, for example, engineers on our team, like they all want to grow and be leaders. And that's one reason we hired them. Like they're hungry in that capacity. And so a lot of the coaching we do too is like what is for the customer, like what is the value in this particular task, or like what's motivating them, what's stressing them out, like what's the pain point, and like just shifting the paradigm like often,
Yeah.
particularly when you're in client facing communications too.
Yeah.
But like, to your point, like you kind of have to remember the why. And like, when you get into writing code, for example, it's like, of course we always want it to be as well written as possible, as well
Yeah.
documented as possible, concise, etc. But there is a breaking point where it's like, whatever, you refactoring this method, is that valuable to the customer right
Yeah.
now? Like, really, is it? And in a lot of instances, like, no, like that might be valuable down the road when this product is at scale or something. So
Yeah.
I think it's just kind of like making sure you bring back focus to the why you're
Yeah,
doing
for
these
sure.
things.
Yeah. It's easy to get stuck up in the how,
Mhm.
because the how in your industry is very difficult.
Yeah,
The
it's
how,
enough to like take up all your headspace.
it's
Obviously.
literally multiple languages. It's like,
Mhm.
hey, if you want to be a really proficient developer, you might have to learn 4 or 5 languages.
Mhm.
I don't know anybody that knows 5 languages in my everyday life. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
me
Like
neither.
it's a difficult thing. So,
Sure.
what would you say has been some of the biggest obstacles? Obviously, a lot of that's learned behavior. Learning how to
Mhm.
interact with clients and set expectations, and you acquire a lot of that just through experience with people. But what would you say has been some of the biggest things that you guys have overcome?
Oh man, it's such a stereotypical answer. Like COVID's up there. I think
Sure.
that in retrospect, we came out of it like relatively unscathed. But I also feel like because we started the business in 2016, so when that hit, it was like kind of right as we were coming up and getting
Mm,
like out of a lot of the earliest, most challenging stages. So that kind of pulled the rug out from under us. Mostly just in terms of understandably, like everyone was just like, we're gonna like pause all spend,
oh
right?
yeah.
So
And
fortunately,
your industry is such a spectrum.
yeah,
It's like there's this developer over here and there's this developer over here that's like one's really, 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 really good and one's
hmm
a novice developer. And then people don't, they want to spend less money or find ways to
sure,
solve
yeah,
problems in different ways. Everybody's on LinkedIn saying,
yeah, yeah,
the one line in a space and a one line in a space. I've seen
right,
that for years now, but people trying to be active on LinkedIn and things like that. And like the most unique thing about your industry is that there's such a spectrum that there's always going to be somebody cheaper or
oh
somebody
sure,
saying that they're
yeah,
faster or somebody saying that they're better, like,
hmm
and then your head's spinning in 100 different ways because all you're seeing is the
sure,
same
sure,
things from a bunch of people.
sure, and like, I mean, that was a scary time for us. I would say the good news is that pretty much all the folks I'm referring to, like clients, like they stuck with us and they ramped back up in time. I mean, I feel like COVID. I mean, you can look at whatever the like stock market. It's like it was like real scary for a bit there, and then things really like the tech space.
Sure.
Um, maybe it's wild to say this, but like it's like objectively tech like thrived as a result of COVID,
Yeah.
which is strange. I mean, in the beginning, of course, it felt really scary and disastrous, but like I think that COVID really like buoyed a lot of the
Sure.
tech growth. So like we kind of benefited from that, frankly. And now some of that's course correcting a little bit,
Yeah.
you know? So anyways, that was obviously difficult. I mean, we've had kind of every scary situation you can have, like, or I've told this story a million times, so I won't go too into it, but it's like we had that typical scenario too where you got too much of your business in like one client and then that starts to go like south. And again, this story like was bizarre and unusual because we had like one particularly like toxic leader
Yeah.
on that side that really kind of started like like borderline like abusing team members and stuff. But it was hard because it was like right in the throes of COVID, and admittedly we were like probably less inclined to push back really hard than we
Sure.
would in other times because everything felt so fragile. But anyways, like of course, despite our best efforts, and I maintained that like we were doing good work and stuff, but they ended up firing us, as you would expect. And the reason it's like a
You're in
noteworthy
a strange industry, my friend.
yeah,
It really is.
but the reason it's like a noteworthy story is because it like the guy who was a real difficult character, frankly, and obviously I wouldn't dream of like naming their organization or anything, but the guy knew like my wife was being induced for labor like on X day. And so he called me the night before to fire us.
Wow.
So it was pretty brutal. And like, I was, pretty terrified. But the good thing and the takeaway from that story is like, it definitely taught me like always put your team over clients, because the real risk was like burning people out that did not like that dynamic. And fortunately, we didn't lose anyone, but I think we would have eventually.
Sure.
I think people would have rightfully been like, I don't want to work on this account, and like you can either take me off or like I'm leaving. And then we recouped that revenue like very quickly. We like took on other opportunities and stuff that probably we wouldn't have had the bandwidth for. So like, yeah, a big lesson there for me was like, one, don't be afraid. You can't like operate from a place of fear. You got to like choose your team over difficult clients if they surface. This was an anomaly. Like I haven't really seen anything else like this extreme. So yeah, we've had every kind of like seemingly doomsday small business scenario that like somehow a few months later you're like, wow, that was tough, but like we seem to be
It creates a level of anxiety. Like when there's feathers ruffled with your biggest client, it creates a level of anxiety that's really hard to articulate. But it also is like, your business, like when everybody's on the same page that something's happening right now and we all need to be firing on all cylinders to make it through this, it does something to your business.
I mean, I think
makes you push the pace.
Yeah, there is like a camaraderie like that comes with kind of powering through tough times, and
it shows you just how like the ceiling, it literally moves the ceiling because you're like, we can go this hard, you know what I mean?
Right. And I mean, and that's the thing, like I've been at this a while, and I had a business before this too, and so I've kind of ridden the roller coaster, and I think that I can still get, of course, like stressed or ruffled when unexpected things happen, but I've kind of been through so many things that like I can see the other side and know that like just the classic advice is like, is this going to seem important like 2 years from now?
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're probably going to look back and like laugh.
Not at all. Yeah.
So I think like you got to kind of build that underlying confidence and resilience, if you fundamentally have faith in like what you're doing and your team.
Yeah. Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah. Bet on yourself. That's what we say. We say it a lot.
Yeah.
If you're confident, you bet on you and your team.
Mm-hmm.
And when you place that bet on yourself, that mental bet on yourself, like, man, things have a weird way of working themselves out. I always say it too. It's like that. It's kind of that plateau effect. Like when everything's good and then you hit that wall or you hit that obstacle or whatever it may be, it's really just that test to get you to that next place. It's I don't know why it is that way. You know what I mean? And it's not like something that you can manifest or manipulate, but like every time something really annoying happens or really tough happens or you want to throw your hands up at something, it's like you're all right, like your sink or swim moment. And then when you realize like, oh, I can still swim, it's like, oh, now it just gets easier and bigger and better from here. So if you're in the middle of one of those storms right now, you just keep going. Don't quit. I guess it's probably the best advice that you can give out. You probably hear it a lot in your industry. Don't quit. Well, how do people find you if they want to buy something from you? If they want to ask you questions?
Yeah, TyrannosaurusTech.com. We're on social media, of course, especially LinkedIn. We try to put out a lot of good content. I think for folks that, may be listening or watching, a lot of our content is geared towards like folks who are considering, jumping out on their own, or particularly like building a technology product, whether they're founders or folks that are trying to innovate within an existing organization. So a lot of our content is like kind of the type of stuff we're talking about today, where we just try to be really candid about like, here's things that we did that were big mistakes and like what we learned, or things we've seen, really help folks like turn the corner. We also have a podcast called The Digital Footprint, which is like kind of similarly geared towards interviewing, founders and folks in tech about their story. So I'd love for people to check us out. And I'm just Richard at TyrannosaurusTech.com.
Cool. The way that we always end the show here is a little bit of an ode to our name, right? What does it feel like to burn the ship? What does it feel like to go all in on your business? I know that what you said early on, I wanted to reiterate about having a skill that gives you some feeling of you can find ways to be valuable outside should everything go wrong, right? Like you find ways to, if you fall, you only fall into a position where you're still going to be able to be valuable and make money and provide for
Mm-hmm.
your family and
Yeah.
all those things. So I think that maybe because of that skill set of yours, you were able to make that jump a little more gracefully than a lot of people. But a lot of people are jumping and falling flat on their face and hoping they're strong enough to pick themselves up.
Mm-hmm.
But from your perspective, what does it feel like? And why should other people that have that burning desire to be their own entrepreneur and set their own schedule and manage
Mm-hmm.
their own company the way they see fit, why should they seek out that same experience?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's scary, of course, but invigorating. And as you're saying, I mean, I think that it's always healthy to just ask yourself that question and go through the exercise of like, what is truly the worst case scenario here? And in all likelihood, folks who are considering going out on their own, the answer is something like, well, this could just be a disaster. And then I kind of need to go back to what I'm doing and get a normal job. And so usually that's not that bad. And so for me, like, I'm all in. I think, like, for better or worse, mostly overwhelmingly for better. I think an exciting thing and like a weird reality too is since, between my two companies that I've been a co founder for, it's been, 15 years or something. So, like, it's very hard for me to imagine going back in
Sure.
any capacity. Like, I don't think I could go back and work for someone else. Like, if I were looking for jobs, I could, but I'd be like, I don't even know how to characterize what my skills are at this point. Like, what type of job would I look for? So it's like, mostly that's exciting. Like,
Yeah.
you get addicted to it. And of course, it's a lot of work, but I think I really enjoy like feeling like I am controlling my own destiny. I have, we work a lot, but I have a lot of flexibility. I can do kind of whatever I want, frankly. So, like, those things are really fun, like really validating. I think that, you know, you want to, when you're old, look back and feel like you took a chance when you could. And so for folks thinking about it, yeah, I would just encourage that mindset. Don't be reckless, but like know what the worst case scenario is and be really prepared to accept that and roll with it. And then you won't have any regrets about those decisions down the road.
I agree. People regret things that they don't do a lot more than they regret things that they do. I think really
think
is
that's
is
very
a
true.
good way to boil it down to a human perspective, which is always what I like to do. I just like to look at the way people make decisions as humans and the things that we have in common with one another about the way that we logically make decisions about things.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I've realized is that the idea of regret is much more frequent when you don't take a chance than when you do.
Yeah.
Because I've done 350 of these, you know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that I've ever had anyone come in here and say, I regret making that first leap, whether it went extraordinarily poorly. Because we've had people crash and burn,
Mm-hmm.
out on the podcast. They're like, oh, I've done this 3 other times.
Yeah.
Every single one of them have failed.
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm doing what I'm doing now and it's exceeding. But they've never articulated regret about making that initial
Mm-hmm.
move. And the worst case scenario is usually not that bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There are a lot of safe havens put around you for financial ruin. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like, it happens.
Well, and I think that, most entrepreneurs like have those war stories. Like,
Oh, yeah.
Even the iconic ones that we hold up, like they've all got stories where they just like really were, again, falling on their face or like down to their last dollar or something.
yeah.
And I wouldn't advocate
Yeah.
for like putting yourself in a
Yeah.
likely
It's
situation
not a
like
poker
that.
game.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, like you gotta kind of ride the wave and have faith that
For sure.
it'll work out.
Well, I appreciate you coming, my friend. It does mean a
Yeah,
lot.
this was fun.
Yeah, thank you. All right.
Appreciate it.
Burn the ship.
All right.